Dillon Gabriel didn't ask to be the center of this storm, but his continued role as starter has made him a lightning rod in the Browns' unraveling. While Gabriel struggles, Stefanski's loyalty has morphed into stubbornness, and that's enraged Myles Garrett. The locker room is no longer divided quietly, it's erupting, and Garrett is at the front of the charge. His public criticism of the coaching staff wasn't just frustration, it was a message. And now, as trade rumors heat up, Cleveland may be on the verge of losing its defensive soul. Garrett's discontent isn't just personal, it's structural. He's become the symbol of everything the franchise is doing wrong, ignoring performance, alienating leadership, and risking a collapse from within. The asking price.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
3 first-rounders and a player shows just how valuable he is. But the real cost may be what happens inside the locker room if he walks away for good. The Cleveland Browns have officially hit a breaking point, and no, this isn't just some mid-season slump or behind-the-scenes tension that'll get quietly patched up. This is a public unraveling. A complete leadership crisis, led by explosive frustration from the one guy who's been holding it all together, Myles Garrett. We're talking about the Myles Garrett, the face of the franchise. The guy who racked up 5 sacks in one game while the rest of the team looked like it couldn't find the end zone with a map and a flashlight. The guy fans trust. The guy who's shown up, produced, and led, even when the offense was throwing away possessions like candy on Halloween. And now, he's done. Cleveland Browns locker room photos. Garrett has reportedly exploded over what he sees as outright mishandling of the team by head coach Kevin Stefanski, particularly Stefanski's refusal to move on from quarterback Dillon Gabriel despite game after game of poor performance. The tipping point wasn't just one loss. It's been a slow boil of favoritism, silence, and dysfunction. And now, it's not simmering anymore. It's blowing up. Garrett's public criticism of the coaching staff isn't just venting. It's a shot across the bow. He's frustrated, disillusioned, and by all accounts, nearing a point where he might formally request a trade if things don't change. And when someone like Garrett starts making noise, the whole league listens. So do the fans. Cleveland supporters are furious. Not at Garrett, but at the organization. Because this isn't just about a few bad calls, it's about a pattern. A pattern of mismanagement. A pattern of letting loyalty and politics override performance. A pattern of not listening to the players who actually show up and produce. And now, trade rumors are circling like vultures. Real ones. With real suitors. The Philadelphia Eagles and New England Patriots have reportedly shown aggressive interest in Garrett. The Browns' response? They slapped a high asking price on him, 3 first-round picks and a player. That number says everything. They know he's irreplaceable. They know this isn't just another guy on the roster. He's their defensive anchor. Their franchise cornerstone. And yet, they're taking calls? That kind of move screams instability. It screams desperation. You don't float your top player unless your house is already on fire, and right now, Cleveland's front office is covered in smoke. And let's not forget, this isn't Garrett asking out. But sources are making it clear. If the dysfunction continues, if Stefanski keeps doubling down on bad decisions, Garrett might not wait much longer. He's playing at an elite level. He knows his worth. And if the organization doesn't value it, he'll find one that does. The scary part is how deep this fracture runs. Because this isn't just about Garrett. This is about a team culture that's unraveling. The Browns have built their identity around defense. Garrett is that identity. You lose him, you don't just lose sacks and stats, you lose morale. You lose trust. You lose the heartbeat of the team. And based on the direction this is going, that risk is very real. Meanwhile, Stefanski continues to dig in. He's still backing Dillon Gabriel despite poor performances. Despite the offense holding the defense hostage week after week. Despite the growing noise from inside the locker room and the stands. That kind of stubbornness isn't leadership, it's negligence. And it's why things are now at a breaking point. Fans see it. They're not blind. Protests, trending hashtags, stadium chants. It's all hitting the surface now. Browns fans aren't just disappointed. They're done. They're rallying behind Garrett, calling out the coaching staff, demanding change. And when the fans start siding with a player over the organization, that's a huge red flag. It means trust is already broken. It means the front office is one move away from a full-blown revolt. The media isn't holding back either. This isn't being brushed under the rug. It's being dissected from every angle. Headlines are painting the Browns as a franchise in freefall. Commentators are questioning the leadership. Trade analysts are calculating Garrett's value like he's already gone. The perception is setting in, and once it does, it's hard to walk it back. Internally, the locker room is split. Players are reportedly choosing sides. Tension is rising. And it's no wonder. When your head coach is blindly backing a struggling quarterback week after week, despite what the rest of the team is doing, it creates division. Garrett's calling it out because he sees the bigger picture. The team's unity is crumbling. And that unity is already paper thin. When leadership refuses to course correct, even as the defense keeps showing up and the offense keeps falling apart, you're not just losing games. You're losing the locker room. You're losing trust. And the moment trust is gone, there's no fixing it with a pep talk or a press conference. You're already in the red. Let's be real, Garrett didn't have to say anything. He could have kept quiet, padded his stats, smiled for the cameras, and waited for his next contract negotiation. But that's not what leaders do. Leaders speak up. Leaders call it out when a team is circling the drain and nobody at the top is doing anything to stop it. And what was the response? Trade rumors. Not leadership changes. Not system overhauls. Trade rumors. The signal to Garrett is loud and clear. Speak out, and we'll shop you. That's the message the Browns just sent to every player in that locker room. And it's a dangerous one. Because it tells them performance doesn't matter. Loyalty doesn't matter. If you speak the truth, you're expendable. The irony? They're asking for 3 first-rounders and a player for him. That's an all-time price. That means they know what they're giving up. But they'd still rather risk it than fix the actual problem, which is Stefanski's inability to manage a team in crisis. His unwavering support for Dillon Gabriel has become a liability. It's no longer about giving a young QB time to grow. Gabriel has underperformed. Consistently. And while the defense is keeping the Browns competitive, the offense has become a black hole, one that Stefanski refuses to acknowledge. And Garrett? He's had enough of watching his elite performances go to waste. This isn't about scheme or bad luck. It's about leadership that refuses to adapt. Leadership that won't own up to mistakes. That's what's fueling Garrett's frustration. That's what's causing the fan base to explode. That's why media speculation is ramping up by the hour. Because this whole situation, the team's fragile locker room, Garrett's boiling point, Stefanski's stubbornness, the front office's flirtation with a franchise-crippling trade, it's all a masterclass in how not to manage a team on the edge. And let's talk about the stakes here. If Garrett walks, whether he demands a trade or the front office sends him out, it's more than a personnel loss. It's a statement. It tells fans that no one is safe. That even the player who gave his all, led through dysfunction, and delivered elite performance can be discarded. It's a culture killer. A morale death sentence. And it might take years to recover from. And Andrew Barry. Because who wants to stay on a team where leadership ignores the obvious and punishes the outspoken? Who wants to commit to a franchise that won't protect its own cornerstone? The collapse won't stop at Garrett. Once the foundation cracks, everything else becomes easier to walk away from. Young players won't buy in. Veterans will stop believing. And free agents? They'll avoid Cleveland altogether. That's how fast this kind of situation spreads. That's how fast a franchise slips from dark horse contender to full rebuild. And fans know this. That's why they're protesting. That's why social media is erupting with calls for Stefanski to be fired. That's why Garrett has become more than a defensive end. He's become a symbol for what should be right with this team. Accountability, integrity, performance, leadership. Right now, the Browns are sending the opposite message. They're gambling everything on the idea that fans will forgive them, that players will stay quiet, and that Garrett will eventually cool down. But that gamble is reckless. Because once the trust is gone, really gone, no amount of PR spin can rebuild it. So here's the deal. If the Browns want to salvage this, they have a narrow window. They need to shut down trade talk immediately, publicly back Garrett, and address the leadership issue. That doesn't mean press releases. That doesn't mean damage control. That means action, accountability, real change. Because without that, Garrett walks. Fans revolt. And the Browns become the next case study in how internal mismanagement can destroy a team from the inside out. Let us know where you stand. Should the Browns move on from Stefanski and fix the damage with Garrett, or is it already too far gone? Drop your take in the comments. If you've been following the chaos, hit that like button. And if you want every twist and turn from sports' biggest meltdowns and franchise fails, subscribe. You're not going to want to miss what's next. Because if you've followed every piece of this disaster, the locker room divide, the trade rumors, the complete breakdown of communication between Myles Garrett and leadership, then you already know this isn't about one argument, one bad game, or even one player. This is about a franchise that's lost its grip on reality. At its core, this crisis is the result of ignoring problems until they metastasize. Didn't just back a struggling quarterback. He turned Dillon Gabriel into a symbol of everything wrong with the current regime. By refusing to hold him accountable, Stefanski put his own credibility on the line. And now, it's gone. This isn't even about Gabriel anymore. It's about what his continued starts represent. A coach who refuses to adjust, a staff that doesn't trust its defense enough to complement their efforts, and an organization that's watching its internal chemistry dissolve without lifting a finger to stop it. And Andrew Berry, Myles Garrett tried to keep the locker room together. He tried to speak up, tried to lead from the front. But leadership without support is just noise. And when he finally snapped, when he went public with his frustration, when he made it clear that the favoritism, the dysfunction, and the silence had pushed him to the edge, what did the front office do? They didn't back him. They didn't publicly defend him or reinforce his place in the future of the franchise. They quietly leaked his trade value. That's the most disrespectful move of all, not just because of what it says about their view of Garrett, but because of what it says to everyone else in the building. That your best player can dominate, lead, speak out, and still be considered disposable if it threatens someone else's authority. And that's the real issue. This entire meltdown is being driven by pride, not strategy. Stefanski doesn't want to admit he was wrong about Gabriel. The front office doesn't want to admit it's failed to create a functional team culture. And now they're too deep in it to turn around without making major sacrifices they don't seem willing to make. So they're hedging, letting Garrett hang in limbo, keeping his name in trade talks while hoping the storm dies down on its own. But that's not how this ends. That's how it gets worse. Because Myles Garrett is not going to stay silent. He's not going to sit back while leadership fails to lead. And he's not going to stay loyal to an organization that treats him like leverage instead of a pillar. What happens when your star defender wants out? You lose your defense. You lose your identity. And in Cleveland's case, you lose the one thing fans still believe in. There's a reason why trade rumors around Garrett sent shockwaves through the league. He's not just productive, he's game-changing. He turns average defenses into playoff-caliber units. He shifts momentum with a single play. And most of all, he wants to win. But he's watching that goal get buried under coaching politics and front office silence. And let's be clear, if the Eagles or Patriots manage to land him, it won't just be a win for them. It'll be a condemnation of the Browns. It'll be the league's way of saying, you had him, and you let him go. And now we'll show you what he should have been doing all along. That's how reputations crumble. We've seen this story before. A franchise gets lucky with a generational player. They waste his prime years. They fail to build around him. They silence his voice when he asks for change. And then they act shocked when he walks. What makes this situation even more infuriating is that it was preventable. The Browns didn't need to entertain trading Garrett. They didn't need to drag this into the spotlight. They needed to listen, to adapt, to recognize that their defense was the only thing keeping them competitive, and that disrespecting its leader was asking for collapse. Instead, they made it worse. And the fans? They're rightfully livid. Post-game interview. These are people who have endured years of letdowns, who watched promising rosters fall apart because of coaching, injuries, or chaos at the top. They believed this era would be different, that with Garrett as the cornerstone, things might finally change. And now, the front office is squandering that faith. You can feel the tension from every corner of the fan base. People want answers. They want accountability. But all they're getting is a wall of silence and vague rumors that only add to the instability. Stefanski still hasn't addressed the disconnect. This isn't just a crisis. This is the kind of moment that defines a franchise for years. If the Browns trade Garrett, they may never recover. Not on the field. Not with the fans. And definitely not in the locker room. Because the fallout won't just be about losing sacks or highlights. It'll be about losing the last shred of trust players had in their leadership. The last remaining connection fans had with the current roster. The last justification for continuing to believe this team is headed somewhere. And if Garrett stays but nothing changes? And Andrew Berry, it's just as bad. Because no one forgets being treated like a bargaining chip. No one forgets being punished for speaking the truth. So what now? That's the million-dollar question. And the answer has nothing to do with draft picks or cap space. It starts with ownership stepping in. And Andrew Berry, anything less is a death sentence for the team's culture. The Browns have a choice to make. But they don't have much time left. Because Garrett's patience isn't infinite. The fans' loyalty is not unconditional. And the rest of the league is circling, ready to turn Cleveland's mistake into their masterstroke. So here we are. One of the best defensive players in the league. In his prime. Delivering elite performances every week. And the team that drafted him is on the verge of throwing it all away, not because of his play, but because they refuse to confront their own mistakes. This is bigger than football. It's about leadership, accountability, and what happens when power goes unchecked. It's about whether a franchise built on hope and hard work can survive the ego and dysfunction currently dragging it down. And it's about whether Cleveland can finally learn from its own history, or if it's doomed to repeat it again. This isn't just about the front office fumbling a trade negotiation or sticking with a quarterback who clearly isn't getting it done. This is about a complete failure to manage what should have been the easiest decision they've had in years. Protect your star. Support your leader. Keep the one guy who's actually producing at an elite level happy. Instead, they've done the opposite. And it's all starting to collapse. Let's talk about that 5-sack game again. Because that wasn't just a performance, it was a statement. Garrett put up numbers that would have defined an entire season for most defensive players, in one afternoon. While his teammates on offense couldn't find rhythm, couldn't hold drives, couldn't even keep the defense off the field. Garrett was dominating. That's not just a high level of play, that's franchise-carrying effort. And what did he get in return? A coach who's refusing to listen. A front office quietly gauging his trade value. And a locker room divided by the team's inability to lead through adversity. If this was any other franchise, Garrett would be untouchable. There would be no rumors, no leaks, no questions. His jersey would be on every wall, his name etched into every plan for the next 5 years. But in Cleveland, he's getting the cold shoulder. And for what? To protect a quarterback who isn't ready? To avoid admitting that a coaching philosophy has failed? To preserve egos instead of relationships? It's self-sabotage. And it's killing what little hope this team had left. The Browns are staring down the barrel of a decision that will either define a new era or bury this one for good. Because if they lose Garrett, it's not just a roster shakeup. It's a message. To the players. To the fans. To the entire league. That message? We'll trade greatness before we admit failure. And if that's the hill they're choosing to die on, then they better be ready for what comes next. Because the fans are done. Not in a theoretical way. In a tangible, vocal, unforgiving way. They're already organizing around Garrett, making it clear that they won't tolerate watching him get pushed out like some locker room distraction. They know exactly who the problem is, and it's not number 95. The media is circling. National headlines are dissecting every word Garrett says, every move the Browns don't make. Analysts are already lining up trade packages, mapping out where he'd fit, how he'd transform contenders into favorites. And it's not speculation anymore, it's pressure. And pressure bursts pipes. The Browns are either going to cave and do the unthinkable, or they're going to be forced into a major internal change to keep the roof from caving in completely. Because what's happening right now isn't sustainable. The locker room is divided. The coaching staff is defensive. The front office is frozen. And Garrett? He's producing like a Defensive Player of the Year candidate while being treated like a nuisance. That disconnect is dangerous. That's how culture dies. And don't forget, this team was supposed to be entering a competitive window. This was supposed to be the start of a multi-year run where Cleveland finally became a consistent playoff team. But that dream's gone. Shattered by silence, arrogance, and the refusal to do the obvious. Fix what's broken before it breaks you. And here's the kicker, this could still be saved. It's not too late. But it will be soon. There's still time to come out, make it right, and recommit to Garrett as the centerpiece of the defense and the team. But that means confronting some uncomfortable truths. It means accountability. It means Stefanski facing the music and either changing his approach or stepping aside. Because one thing is clear, you can't keep Garrett and keep doing things the same way. Something has to give. If leadership chooses ego over unity again, then the fallout will be irreversible. Players will start quietly asking for trades. Free agents will take less money to go somewhere stable. Young talent will grow up in a broken culture. And the franchise will tumble back into the same pit it spent years trying to crawl out of. This moment right here, this exact moment, is the turning point. Either the Browns take the hit, admit the failure, and rebuild around what's actually working, or they double down on dysfunction, lose Garrett, and light the match on a full-blown collapse. The sad part is, it didn't have to be this way. Garrett wanted to lead. He wanted to win here. He was never the problem. He was the solution, waiting for the people around him to catch up. But now, with every passing day of silence, every press conference with no answers, every leak about picks and trade calls, that solution is slipping through their fingers. And the Browns? They might be about to learn the hard way what it really costs to lose someone like Myles Garrett. You've seen the warning signs. You've heard the frustration. You've watched this saga unravel piece by piece. So what do you think? Does Garrett stay and force the Browns to finally face the truth? Or does he take control of his career and find a franchise that actually knows how to use a generational talent? Sound off in the comments, hit like if you think Garrett deserves better, and subscribe for more stories from the edge. Because when teams fall apart like this, you know we'll be there to break it all down.